Hello folks! Today we're gonna be talking about my recommendations for knife maintenance. So how do we sharpen, how do we check if the sharpening has been done, and how we clean the knives, as well as some insight about the basic knowledge of metallurgy. So let's say I'm Roland Lanier and this is my masterclass. Well, maybe this sentence is copyrighted. So, okay, let's say just there's some stuff I know and I'm gonna share with you. Sorry for the weird perspective from above, but I wanted you to see what I can show you with my hand as well as my ugly mug. And today we're gonna use also some visual marker to know what we're talking about. So I'm gonna use these three colors to separate the chapters. First, we're gonna use the green one. So when you're gonna see the green marker next to me, you will know that we're talking about basic metallurgy. Then we're gonna use, of course, the red one. And the red one is gonna be about methodology and the actual motion I recommend you to use to sharpen and yeah, the tricks I know, all right? And then blue will be about quality check. How do you make sure that you did the job, and how do you know if it still has some work to do? All right. I will also try to separate the chapters the YouTube way, even though I don't really know how that works. But I'm going to learn before I release this video. So if you just browse and slide your arrow over the line down the video and see the little thumbnail, you will know with the colors what we're talking about if you come back to this video later on, because I think this is the kind of content you need to check sometimes, over time. I'm sorry for all of my French-speaking friends if I'm doing this video in English, but that's because I think the subtitles and the translation will work better in YouTube if it's translated from English to French rather than from French to English, for all of the people who don't have the luxury to speak Molière's language. Excuse me guys if I don't use some dynamic post-prod and special effects. I just don't know how to do that. It would be super cool, and I'm so jealous of everybody who does videos with that, but you will just have to imagine this. All right, so imagine some tiny emojis or memes popping up on the screen, but in the meantime I'm going to try to focus on the educational content. Let's get started. I will start with the green, all right? So green is about basic metallurgy. So what is the knife made of? I mean, we're talking about the blade, right? The handle is not really relevant. The blade most of the time is made of steel. And when we talk about steel, it's heat-treated steel. In France, we say acier trempé. Acier trempé means quenched steel. But you have all of this process to make the steel hard and flexible and resilient. Otherwise, you can't keep an edge on it. So while we're talking about keeping an edge, steel nature and the steel structure given by the heat treatment will have an impact on how the steel and the blade will behave during the action and afterward when you are going to be trying to bring the edge back. So the trick is, for a long time there was only carbon steel, the one that can rust, and the stainless steel, and mostly it was about its non-rusting capabilities, and it had not really anything to do about edge and cutting abilities. So more recently, I mean since like the last 2-3 decades, a lot of improvements have been done in this technology. So right now we can have some better best of two worlds things, and we can also have some a lot of variations, so you can adjust and pick the exact balance you want between the sharpness and the stainless resistance. The blade we're making here and the steel we're using, it's like an even newer technology called the nitrogen boosting. That appeared like maybe 15 years ago, but it was really democratized like 10 years ago. And so it's mostly about not only using the carbon inside the steel to harden the alloy, but also the nitrogen that instead of creating carbide crystals will create nitride crystals. So nitrides will have a hardening effect on the steel. And it will not have the negative side effects you can find with carbides. Mostly it will prevent a little more the rust to happen, and it will also prevent the crystal, the general crystal of the steel matrix to grow, to inflate, because there is this cycle when you reheat the blade, reheat the steel, the crystal tends to inflate and to grow bigger, especially when you have a combination between high carbon and chromium. The two combined will create something called the chromium carbides, and these crystals are pretty big. Imagine a pile of sand and in which you can see some big rocks. So now imagine this pile of sand is your edge on your blade. When the two sides meet, you will have sometimes rocks, or on the sides. On the sides it's not a big deal, but on the edge it will be a problem, because this rock obviously will cut less thin that if you have like an homogeneous structure of sand grains, and sometimes even with traction and abrasion, some of these big rocks per se could fall off and get teared off, and so you will have a big rock-shaped hole that will in the end create like some seesaw structure that will not really cut nice. The idea is to go deeper and deeper into the keenest possible edge, so you can really cut with the most surgical approach. So when you think about all that, the choice of your steel can be critical, because every time a steel has over 0.6% of carbon and chromium in the same alloy, you can create this kind of chromium carbides, and it will not be good for the structure of your edge. There are some tricks in the metallurgy to avoid that, but mostly it's no magic. It will always fall in one of those two sides. So the heat treatment afterwards can also better a little the balance, but it will not change everything. The most important thing will stay true. So when you know that, you will know also that once your blade is treated, once your blade is hardened, you need to make sure that you won't heat the blade again over a certain threshold. And when I mean threshold, I mean like basically a little higher than room temperature. If you heat your blade, especially for an extended period of time, over 100 degrees or more, you will damage the heat treatment. So you will mess with the crystals, the carbides inside your blade. You will destroy it. It will look exactly the same, because heat treatment is not visible. The blade can become blue for a while because it has been heated. But if you scratch it a little bit, you will come back to the silver color the steel has. So heat treatment is not something you can see, but it can be totally destroyed by the temperature. So I absolutely urge you to stay away from any kind of polishing wheel, motor polishing wheel tool that people can sell you. It's really bad, and it can really damage your steel, especially if you're sentimentally attached to your knife. Don't do that, because even just once, it's enough to kill your blade. sometimes the damage cannot be repaired. I think it's very important if we want to take care of the tools we love that we develop some skills. If you know how to sew, you won't have to be worried about tiny holes in your socks. You won't be throwing away your socks because there is a tiny hole in them. You will just sew them back on, you know. And that's what can allow you to waste less stuff. And that's gonna be very important. It's gonna be critical in the future years, even for many things, that if we don't want to spend so much money in times of high inflation, if we don't want to waste resources, we will have to learn and develop skills so we can maintain, so we can fix, so we can reuse, so we can craft, and we don't have to fall all the time in the same industrial process that is super high energy consuming, that is money consuming, that is not good, and that brought you to the bad situation we're in. So it's a very simple tool I'm going to use today. It's actually two simple tools. It's sharpening rod and the whetstone. These two tools just require some skills with your hands, and that's something someone can easily develop. Okay, so that's just some basic tricks to know, and anybody can do it. So if you can do it, you won't have to buy this expensive whatever stuff developed by whatever Kickstarter that assure you that every knife will come perfect. I mean, this will make your knife perfect, and this costs $40. So don't go after all of this shit and from company that won't exist tomorrow. This is gonna stay, this is gonna stay, and once you know the skills, once you have the skills, it's forever, you know, and you can teach others. So let's go and get these skills. The thing you're going to do the most frequently is to sharpen with the whetstone, because as I mentioned before, when only the last bit of the tip is touching the ceramic, you don't have to go through the whole process of sharpening the knife over the sharpening rod. You can just focus on a very local place on the tip. You know, this will be way faster. And this can be done about once every week. So let's use some water. All right, you can put plenty of water over the stone, you know, and with just touching the tip with the flattest angle you can get without scratching the sides of your knife, you know, you will do this circular motion like this, and just sharpen what you need to sharpen. Here, just a few circles on the stone and you will be all good. You know, I use 1200 grit. That's not a very thin grit, but then you're not trying to, you know, to beat a record of how sharp your knife can be, you know, like in the Kevin Costner movie, cutting handkerchief up in the air. You know, the thinnest you can get will not make much of a difference inside the plate, because after two cuts, you're going to be left with just the same dull blade. So overkill is not helping in this. You just need to find a good balance so you won't spend much more time sharpening it, and it will still be very efficient when you're going to use it, and it will have this wow effect. But you won't have to spend like half an hour going through the whole range of Japanese whetstones. I mean, this is way enough if you do it frequently. If you let the blade go too dull, yes, you're going to have a problem and you're going to have to grind it. But if you do it like once a week, a few seconds on each blade, you're going to be always perfect, you know? So just like this, the flattest you can, all right? Some small circular motions. You don't need to have a big stone, and just focus on the tip. Just focus on the tip, you know? And that's it. This one is okay. You don't have to do any more than that. So yeah, 4 circles each side on every blade. So if you're just at home, that means, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds tops. If you're in a restaurant and you have like 50 knives to sharpen, it can go pretty fast as well. You know, you're gonna do that for 5 minutes. It's gonna be good. Then once every 2 weeks, even in a restaurant, you know, once every 2 weeks, once every month, if you're at home, you just take the whole rod, and you can sharpen the natural abrasion that occurred on the rest of the blade. All of the rest of the blade that touched soft food can be sharpened very easily with this, and it will be more regular to use the sharpening rod rather than use the whetstone and do that, you know. But with the sharpening rod, just, you know, grab it like that, and you're going to do a motion just like if you were cutting like a wooden stick, you know, trying to make a narrow tip on a wooden stick. All right, so you start with the beginning of the edge, and you go up till the tip like this, up till the tip. All right, some people will do this, you know, toward themselves. I don't recommend ever to bring an edge toward yourself. Even the slightest accident can happen, and you don't want that. So go towards the outside, you know, and so the flattest you can, again, until you don't scratch the surface of the sides of your knife, but the flattest you can, the flattest, the sharpest. So like this, you don't have to put pressure, you don't have to go fast. When you acquire some skill, when it's become natural, you can do that, you know, it will be easier and you will be faster doing it. But even though it's not taking so long anyway, so just do that without pushing too fast. But if you're doing this in a restaurant, you will notice sometimes that the surface of your sharpening rod is starting to shine a little. That means it's getting wear off too. You need to replace it if you're in a restaurant. I mean, for a household, you can maybe use the same rod for a few years, like 2-3 years maybe. But for a restaurant, it's gonna be like probably 6 months or so. Okay. After that, it's not gonna do anything to your knife anymore. So you will have to get a new blade. But a new blade still is like maybe 20 bucks. So you can go for the sharpening rod with the blade you can detach and run and replace. So you don't have to throw away the whole thing. You can just, you know, take the blade out, put a new one, and there you go. All right. Another thing about the direction of the sharpening is never go away from the cutting, from the edge. Okay, you still always to use the knife like if you were waiting to cut through the sharpening rod, like this. Okay, not like this. This will be less accurate, and it can sometimes, you know, round the edge a little too much. That will also prevent the cutting to be good. A good angle is really the flattest possible and the smallest angle possible, you know. If you do this too much, if you raise the back of the spine of your blade too much, you're going to end up with like a 90 degrees angle, and this cannot cut, you know. You need to go the flattest possible. But if you don't want to ruin the look of your knife, you need to be careful not to scratch the surface. So that's the reason why. Start with the base, flat as possible. You can see maybe I'm using like the equivalent of the thickness of the spine with, as a distance from the rod, you know. Yeah, and so yeah, this is enough. Some people will tell you 17 degrees or stuff like that. I mean, you know, you don't have a ruler in your eye. So something simple to remember, the flattest you can, you know, and it will always be good. Some advanced technique. If you are willing to sharpen a chef knife, this will be slightly different, because a chef knife is working against wood mostly, or a board which will be in plastic or something like this. But it rarely cut into ceramic or against steel. So most of the wearing off of the blade is going to happen here, because even if you're cutting against bamboo, which is very fibrous and has a lot of silicium in it, it will create abrasion against your blade, and it will tear off small particles that are on top of the edge. So when you are willing when you are using your chef knife, whether it's mostly doing this, so you can see where the contact is against the table, right? So this part will be mostly weared off. Sometimes also this, if you're cutting a lot of herbs or onions that has also a high rate of silicium in it. So sometimes you're doing this, cutting finely, and so this can also, and since it's the part you need to be the sharpest because you're willing to cut all of these little herbs, this is also the part you're going to sharpen the most. So this can create like a hole, a curve that is not allowing you to have all of the edge touching the board, and so you're not going to cut your herbs anymore. So for straightening this, it's going to take a long time, and it's going to take a stone, so you will have maybe a bigger stone, so maybe you will have to ask a professional if this happens, but it doesn't have to happen. Sometimes when you are going to sharpen your big blades, this sliding motion will be way enough. What will happen most of the time is this bit is going to be weared off. So you can also sharpen the whole thing like this, like everybody does, all right? When you're doing this, you're also removing material on parts of the edge that maybe are already good, that don't need to be sharpened. So if you want to just focus on the place where you need to focus and need to work, you can also do this. It will go faster, and you will get to the point. And then at the end, you will align everything like this, all right? Align everything, so everything is cutting good, And now we need to get to a very important point, and probably the most important point in this video is the quality check and verification. So how do you know that you've done the job with sharpening your knife? Most people do that, and I've seen any kind of interpretation about that. Some people say, oh, it's sharp, when it's not. Some people say, it's not even sharp what it is. So I don't know what kind of criteria people are using to make up their mind about this. The feeling they have with the thumb skin can be so different. My personal way of feeling things with my fingers is like this, I'm very, very gently letting the edge scratch the surface of my fingertips. Maybe so it can, scratch and create a different feelings over the fingerprints. But in order to have this kind of sensations, I had to compare this with shaving of my arms with a razor-like edge for a while, and doing multiple different tests so I could match them together and make sure that this feeling was about what I could verify on the other test. So it took me maybe 6 months or so of everyday training, so you're not going to do that. So what I suggest instead is that you use some very simple verification process I developed over the years. If you take your blades like this and you just put it perpendicularly under a bright light, you will see probably some pieces of the edge shining, reflecting the light. And if there is room for reflection, that means it's not sharp. I mean, when the two sides, when the two bevels of your edge meet together very keenly, there is no room for reflection. I mean, you cannot see the reflection over crystals. You can only see through a microscope. So you won't see this reflection ever. So if you see reflection, that means the surface is flat, is dull. So that's where you need to sharpen, and you don't need to sharpen where you don't see reflection. So maybe at the first few attempts you won't see the reflection at all, but put the blade under a bright light, play with the angle like this, and until you can see the reflection. I mean, this one is already sharp, it's brand new, but this one has been used for many dirty tasks here. Yeah, I can see here the reflection on the tip. I can see also here a tiny reflection on the place where I cut cardboard. And so I know that's where I will have to put my efforts. So for starter, I will have this work with the stone, all right? And that's it. This one needs a little more, I've been really treating it badly. That's my knife for doing all the dirty stuff. Right, and that's it. Now I made most of the job, and so the rest will be only by using the sharpening steel, And so I can check if there is still some reflection. If there is only reflection here and nothing there, I don't need to sharpen here and don't need to remove extra material here when it's already good. So I can only focus on the little part, try find the place which is the least wear off also on your steel, because after a while it's gonna happen, and try and use all of the surface so it will last longer. And in the end, and here, I can feel it. I can feel it's better. I can feel it's better. And here you can also do the usual check, works. And so 2 basic tools and a few new skills. And yeah, you don't need anything else. So all of the fancy gadgets you can get on Kickstarters, and that will prevent you to develop the actual skills. It's not a good idea. It's not making you independent. It's just like these chopping machines you can see sometimes on the TV shows, and it looks like a good idea, but and of course you won't risk to cut a finger, but you will spend way more time cleaning the machine afterwards than cutting the actual stuff. So when you learn how to do the basic rocking motion with a chef knife, you will just have to clean it like this with a sponge, and it's gonna be okay. And so you will gain way more time, and you will only need a tool. You won't have to use electrical power. You don't have to spend some money in this weird machine. And if the machine fails you someday, you will still be able to chop food. So it's always better with skills, really. We have a lifetime to learn new skills, and some of them can be really strategic. When you're working in a restaurant, you know that sharpening is always an issue. And some restaurant will send the knives over long distances just to get them sharp again. Most restaurants won't even bother, and at the moment they will just give up and use the dull knives. I mean, what's the point of buying a knife that will cost you like maybe $50 or so, at professional price, to then never benefit from the wow effect and always let people cut with dull knives? I mean, you're missing the point. You are working in a fine dining restaurant. You are trying to make the best possible food in a bistro. You want the guests to have this wow effect. You want them to see the dish coming, grab the knife, cut once, and that's it. And then they can enjoy it with the flattest possible surface, less exposed to the oxygen and stuff, with the most possible juice inside the food. So this can be done. This is not out of reach. You can just do it if you know the skills, if you teach the skills to one of your staff, and this can be replicated, because it's just human skill. You don't need to buy extra stuff. You don't need to invest in so much. You just need to invest in human and in your skills. And with this, you'll be free of many things, and you will have good stuff. And if you want to have good stuff, you need to know how to use good stuff. That's part of the deal. So take care, guys. Sorry for the long video. I'm not a professional YouTuber. I'm not a professional streamer. I'm a knife maker, for fuck's sake. So I'm just sharing some professional advice with you guys and girls, and I hope it was useful for you. Please let me know in the comment below if you can now keep your knives sharp, and be careful with your kids and with your guests when they will dine at your place. Now things will be different. Take care.